just apologize for the slight delay. We had some technical difficulties, but we're up and running. If everyone would please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Just some housekeeping matters. If you're a member of the community who would like to speak this evening, there are yellow cards in the back. Please fill one out and bring it up to staff. We'll call you up during that public hearing. We ask members of the community to keep their presentations to 3 minutes or less. We'll let you know if you're approaching the 3-minute mark. We remind applicants to please keep their presentations to 30 minutes. If you have a presentation to show, we ask you to show that to the community that's here, and we'll have paper copies up here. That being said, I'll go to the first item on the agenda, site plan modification public hearing, Charles P. Ferraro, SP 2023-005, west side of Grant Avenue, 280 feet south of Moffett Boulevard, Islip, 156 Grant Avenue. Applicant requests a parking relaxation, permission to locate overhead doors facing Grant Avenue, and other site plan modifications in connection with the construction of a new 4-story mini storage facility. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Charles, do you want to handle this? Thank you. Good evening, again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Anthony Guardino. I represent the applicants, Charles Ferraro, Mark Saglioka, and 156 Grant Avenue, LLC. Oh, is it working? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Which is, and they are seeking minor site plan modifications in order to construct a new mini storage warehouse at 156 Grant Avenue in Islip. The site was purchased by my clients several years ago from the Suffolk County Land Bank after it was taken for failure to pay taxes. For about a half a century, this property was used as an automobile junkyard, and as a result was designated by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation as a brownfield site. My clients have been working with the DEC and a geotech advisor to develop a site management plan that will remediate this site for the industrial purpose that is proposed today. Since the DEC approved site management plan will not remediate the site to a residential standard because it can't, it would be unreasonable to expect this site to be used for any kind of residential purposes. So this is kind of like the best you can do here. It's an industrial site with a very clean industrial use that's being proposed. While this application predates my involvement, I'm told that this is the application was the product of numerous meetings with town officials and based on input from the planning department. The mini storage facility will be located directly across the street from an existing mini storage facility that was constructed by the same developer. And the site is located, this site is about an acre and a half in size, 1.47 acres. It is zoned industrial, as I mentioned, and the industrial zone, as you know, I-1 zone permits mini storage warehouses subject only to site plan approval and a building permit, and of course any site modifications that are needed. That's why we're here tonight. So the town code further states that in the I-1 district, buildings can be 60 feet or 4 stories in height. This proposed building will comply with the maximum height requirement, but I will point out, and you can see it from the rendering, that a significant portion of the building will actually be far less than the 60 feet in height. There's only a small architectural element of the building, which you can see there, which is like the cupola that actually reaches to the 60 feet. The building will also have a floor area ratio of just under 90%, where an FAR of 100% is permitted if the applicant complies with the bonus criteria set forth in the town code. I'm advised by my clients that they intend to meet the covenant, landscaping, renewable energy, and architectural requirements in order to achieve this higher FAR. While the site does comply with the town code's dimensional criteria, it does not comply with all of the requirements of the subdivision and land development standards, so there are 3 modest site plan modifications that are required. The first relates to parking. The site does not comply with the town code's requirement for 12 parking spaces, but as this board probably knows, mini storage warehouses do not generate much in the way of need for parking spaces, so the 6 spaces will be sufficient. But in addition, this is kind of a unique situation because, as I mentioned, my clients have the facility across the street, which is a self-storage facility that is way overparked because it was developed at a time when the parking requirement was much higher for mini storage warehouses. So there's a lot of parking across the street, So this reduces the demand even further that we can have employees in particular park across the street. And that, in fact, is one of the requirements of the town in the proposed conditions. There will also be a condition for a formal agreement for cross-access and cross-parking with that site across the street. The second modification, relates to the orientation of the overhead doors. The town requirement is that you not have overhead doors facing residential uses. Here, there will be a few overhead doors that face south towards the residences on Christie Joe Court. But again, because this is not really an active use, we don't believe these overhead doors are going to get used much. But in any event, my client is proposing to mitigate any visual impacts from these doors with a well-planted 25-foot landscape buffer that will be planted with evergreens on top of a raised berm to make the landscaping even more effective than it would be. The third modification relates to the distance between the entrance curb cut and Christie Joe Court. Well, this is closer than what the town requires. There is sufficient distance so as to not be unsafe. But I would also point out that the location of this curb cut was also dictated by the need to keep the curb cut as far away as possible from the rail crossing. There's a railroad crossing right there, and that would make access very difficult and maybe even dangerous when a train is approaching. I will mention that the applicants received a variance from the zoning board back in April of 2023 to reduce the side yard setback of the building. This is to the railroad tracks from 60 feet to 25 feet, and that allowed the building to move further north and further away from the residences to the south. So that, and that also allows for the greater buffer on the south side, so that helps the residences to the south. And I would respectfully request that this board consider granting this application because this is a quiet, permitted use in the Industrial 1 zone. It would allow for the remediation of a brownfield site and would allow this property to be restored to the tax rolls. We anticipate that it will generate about $100,000 in taxes with no burden on the schools or on other community services. And finally, I would point out that we did receive a copy of the proposed conditions from the planning department today, reviewed them with my client, and they find them to be both reasonable and acceptable.
So, William, I'm going to go to public hearing. I just have one question for you. You say that there's only a small portion that's 60 feet. What is the height of the rest of the building?
You know more? I had a conversation today, and I was told 44. I don't have an elevation in front of me.
So you think 44 is the max height on the rest of the building? It only goes to
I don't have a plan, so I don't want to say that for sure. My client is, yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Mark Saglioka, 131 East Main Street, Bay Shore, New York. I'm one of the owners. So we meet the 60 feet, but I would say from the top of the cupola to the top of the ridge is probably about 8 or 10 feet. So I would say the top of the ridge right now is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 50, 52. But if you see the rendering, if you look at the rendering, the way we designed it was to do that fourth story to look more like a residential, an old-style residential Victorian home. So it's not siding going straight up to the 50, 55 feet. It has dormer dog houses with roofing material. And then, like we did across the way, which with the help of the town and the Architectural Review Board, we did a reverse gable, which is also, you know, you see that inherently throughout the South Shore of Long Island, a gambrel roof. So it gives that more of a residential feel. So that fourth story, regardless, you know, even though it's upwards of 55 feet or 50 feet, it does bring it down. It brings the look down a bit, coupled with the fact that we're berming up both Grant Avenue and the south side with big evergreens like our rendering shows. You know, from a drive-by perspective, you're not going to really, you may see the top, you may see the cupola or the fourth floor, which again looks more like a residential building. And the one across the street is a perfect example of that.
It's just so it's 50 to 52 feet is what we think the height is, so we can find that plan somewhere and get us that information.
Yeah, we'll get that for you, absolutely, yes.
And your point to the evergreens, what are the average height that evergreens grow, and how long is it going to take to get that tall?
So Leyland cypress, we plant a lot of Leyland cypress throughout all our subdivisions and our communities for apartments, only because they grow about a foot, foot and a half a year. They're really a weed, and they do very well. And they're evergreen. Obviously, they're green year-round. So normally we'd buy them at 8 to 10 foot, 5 foot on center. Maybe sometimes we stagger them. This plan is pretty elaborate when it comes to landscaping, because we went back and forth and worked with the town, and to ensure, especially the residents south of us at Christie Mac Court, that there was enough coverage there. So again, if we plant them at 8 feet, in 3 years, they could be 12, 15 feet. The ones at my house are almost as tall as my ridge, and I chop off about 2 feet a year. And they're about 25 feet high right now.
Thank you. We're going to go to the public hearing, then come back for a staff report, then we'll have some questions. We'll go to Mr. Brown to call the public hearing.
Kenneth Buka?
Hi, Kenneth Buxa, 12 Christie Joe Court. I'd like to bring up a couple points. The ZBA that occurred, no one in our community knew that that hearing was happening. We would have been here to shut that down. The variance that was approved, they giving 35-foot relief on the north side. I understand why it's given. It's given towards the railroad. However, that allows this building to grow and be placed 70 feet from our setback. But if it had to meet 60 feet, it would have slid closer to us, and then it would have had to shrink in size. Also, going for a site plan modification as far as the 6 parking spots versus 12. 6 parking spots equates to about 1,000 square feet, which helps overall landscaping calculations on the approval to get to the requirements to be able to build at this height. Some other points as far as the...
Can I just ask you, she's keeping a record, just speak closer to the mic, the acoustics
Oh, I'm
aren't
sorry.
that great. Thank you.
Sounds good here, I can't.
Yeah.
The entrance of the curb cut is also a concern. The grant at that corner specifically has trouble with traffic because of the light, because of the railroad crossing, and if we're adding a crosswalk between the storage unit across the street to this, it's only going to cause more trouble. The other part that I would want to bring up on the site plan, the entrance gate that's sliding to enter this property is only approximately 25 feet off of the road, which if cars are pulling into this, having to access a keypad to open up the sliding gate, that doesn't allow for much room for someone pulling off of Grant. If you look across the way at the other developed lot, the sliding gate is in line with the facade. I think all in all, I am for development. I just think that the board should consider what's being proposed here and look across the street and compare that size to this size on what is, this is a larger lot, but it is a comparable size lot, and I don't think that there is one building in all of industrial one zoning that is 4 stories tall in town of Islip along the train tracks. And I would say that an approval today sets a precedent for tomorrow. I would just like you guys to consider our point of view on this, being that we live directly south of this property. Thank you.
Thank you.
Victoria Cantalozzi?
Hello. I'm Victoria Cangelosi. I live at 4 Christie Joe Court, directly south of the proposed plans. Just give me just one second. I never thought that I would have to appear at a public hearing to prevent the industrialization of the town of Islip, and I must say it is disappointing and disheartening to only now be hearing about this project at this stage of the process. While I support progress and business do not mean something that offer no merits beyond personal corporate gain. It certainly does not come in the form of a 4-story storage unit in our historic little hamlet. This proposal does not meet the needs of the community, as options for storage facilities abound within both the immediate proximity and close radius of the proposed site. Long-term, short-term, public, and private storage is already available. Instead, this 4-story blemish upon the complexion of our town will have detrimental implications that extend far beyond 200 feet of the proposed monstrosity. Instead, it will be a turnoff for families looking to potentially purchase a home and create a life here. It will be a deterrent to small businesses looking to provide actual jobs and tangible services. Instead, it will only encourage and invite corporations and faceless LLCs to see an opening to pounce upon any available land and real estate right here and in the surrounding towns dotting the South Shore. Instead, it will flood our homes, countless homes in a residential neighborhood, with unwanted and constant light at all hours of the day. Our homes face, we are about 500 feet from where the lights will be, and looking at the already existing site on 24 hours a day, will shine into our bedrooms, nurseries, dining rooms, family rooms, and increase ambient light pollution overall. It will increase the noise level in a residential neighborhood, overhead doors 1, 2, 3, 4 stories high, the opening and closing of an electric gate at a whim, the additional foot and auto traffic noises from the number of units and their renters brought on by an excessive 4-story facility. Instead, it will increase the congestion in a small area on a 2-lane road, especially with a gate proposed only 20 feet from the shoulderless roadway. This will turn a road that already caters to school bus stops, emergency vehicles, and a passing train from a bustling intersection into a congested borough avenue, potentially endangering the members of the community. Instead, it threatens the health and the lives of the endangered and rare wildlife in this neighborhood. The established trees and percentage of undeveloped area provide homes and hunting grounds for hawks, osprey, and a pair of protected bald eagles in less than a quarter-mile radius. Instead, the proposed construction for such a structure as planned also threatens the health of residents in the surrounding area, as this parcel of land has historically been labeled toxic and was a site of long-term chemical dumping. The very fact that variance after variance has been needed and continues to be sought show the malintent of this company, its owners, and planners. The encroachment of this massive structure will eclipse the people, schools, home, and the very governmental building in which we are meeting and the body before which I stand. The intentions of this plan flaunt their disregard for this town's sound regulations and requirements, and in no way coincides with or conforms to the character, integrity, quality, or aesthetics of the very place they seek to establish themselves. What precedent does this blatant lack of respect and understanding set for what will be allowed and permitted in the future for and in the future of the town of Islip and its residents? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sarah Goldbach? Sarah Goldbach?
Hi, my name is Sarah Goldbach, and I'm speaking on behalf of my husband, Zachary Goldbach, and myself. Members of the Town Islip Planning Board, I'm writing this to formally express my opposition to the proposed new construction of a 4-story mini storage facility located on 156 Grant Avenue. As a resident of the Islip community since 2019, I want to emphasize my strong concern as to how this project stands could negatively impact our community and the small community that I personally live in. First, the proposed construction of a 4-story structure in the area so close to the heart of Islip would be an absolute monstrosity. The area surrounding 156 Grant Avenue is mostly residential and has small commercial properties that primarily do not exceed 2 to 3 stories at the most. Building a 4-story building of any kind would be inconsistent with the character of our neighborhood and the surrounding area. This would also set a precedent for future large-scale developments, which would further take our quaint suburban town and turn it quickly into a small city. In 2019, I moved to Islip because I love the quiet, relaxed beach, boating, and suburban environment. This is only to list a few of the reasons, but the new construction of this new mini 4-storage facility would directly negate the feel and the vibe of our area. Second, the proposed height and sheer size of the structure would significantly impact the local landscape, obstructing sight lines, and most importantly, impacting the property values of our homes. Many of us in the area have worked hard to create a beautiful place to live, making home improvements, planting flowers, trimming trees, anything to add to the beauty of our area. Most importantly, making all of the improvements fit in with the natural landscape of our surroundings. Above all, our property values. Many of us have just recently purchased homes in the area, and some of us have been here for decades. Many of those who have been here for a long time rely on the value of their home for retirement and their financial reserve. if the value of their home that they have lived in for decades suddenly plummets and may delay their ability to actually retire, move elsewhere because they suddenly cannot afford to sell and move on with a safe financial cushion. Retaining the value of our homes directly affects our community and the future it has. Having residents that feel more financially stable leads to a happier community that is more likely to spend money on leisurely activities, which generates more revenue for the town of Islip, hamlet of Islip, and all its small businesses. A 4-story structure would directly affect the value of my home, my neighbors' homes, and the homes in the surrounding area in a negative way. Third, the proposed construction of a 4-story mini storage facility serves no benefit to the community. The term mini and 4 stories do not belong in the same sentence. There is nothing mini about 4 stories. The storage facility will not contribute to local business as it will not provide any significant employment opportunities. The national average self-storage facility requires only 3 to 5 employees. Therefore, a storage facility will only generate profits for its owners and will not
You can finish.
contribute. I feel like I was on the clock. And will not contribute to the growth of our local community other than some additional tax revenue. Additionally, storage facilities often serve greater purpose to those who live outside the community rather than supporting the needs of the local residents. In summary, a 24-hour storage facility brings unnecessary bright lights at night, excessive traffic to a smaller local roadway, and noise to an otherwise relatively quiet area. A 4-story, 24-hour storage facility brings all of what I just had mentioned and then some. I do agree that the 156 Grant Avenue should be developed, and if it may be a storage facility, I am okay with that. However, I respectfully urge the planning board to carefully weigh and consider the few possible potential benefits to erecting such a large structure versus the overwhelmingly negative effects that it will inevitably have on us, the residents living next to it. Thank you for your consideration in this matter.
Thank you.
Thanks.
James Sorrow.
Good evening. Thank you for listening to us tonight. I'm an old Marine, 41 years in service. I've lived here. I'm the longest resident in Hanson's Landing, 28 years. When I arrived, the toxic dump next to us was a junkyard with all sorts of stuff. Never were we ever informed of what the environmental impact was to what was going on. What we observed was long plumes coming out of the ground and soil being removed, but nobody ever told us in 28 years what was going on. My first concern is, before they start digging, is to make sure that there is an environmental impact study on this area. And I agree with the rest of the people that we need to take a look at the regular area and see that this doesn't fit. I have no idea of what findings were happening with the Environmental Protection Agency. I was told that it was a toxic waste site under the Superfund. But yet never once in the 28 years that I've been there, and I even served as the president of the Homeowners Association, did we ever get any notice about anything. I would like to see, before they dig, that the area is clean and has been cleaned up enough that it has be able to be dug up again. I don't think that we need another storage facility. There are 4 storage facilities within 1 mile and 2 within a half a mile. I don't know whether or not they're saturated with people, but I don't think we need one. And if you look on the map, just in Suffolk County, there must be 100 storage facilities. So the bottom line here is, I don't think we need it. I've sat here. There's no parking on either side of the street. I got a couple of tickets when there was a dirt road there. Why do we need another storage facility? I think it's overkill. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
And I think you heard me because nobody
Yes,
else
If
could.
everybody else can follow through the way he spoke, we'd be in good shape. Thank you.
Karen Ryan?
Hi. My name is Karen Ryan. I live at 16 Christie Joe Court in Islip. I'm here today to express my concerns about the proposed 4-story storage unit facility. The notice we received last Wednesday was the first we heard of this proposal. I am not opposed to development, but a 4-story building is excessive for our town. I live in the townhouse community that borders the proposed storage facility. A 4-story building will tower over our homes. This would also set a precedent for more 4-story buildings in our town. In addition, I have concerns about the contamination of the land in that location and would like more information about testing and remediation. Traffic is another concern, as our residents already have issues exiting Christie Joe Court. This building would definitely change the character of Islip. It would also negatively impact property values in the area. I strongly oppose this proposal. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Lynn Vickers?
Good evening. I am writing to express my strong concern over the proposed development of a 4-story building at the site of 156 Grant Avenue. I have been a resident of Islip for 26 years. I have been living at 8 Christie Joe for those 26 years and have seen a lot of development, but never a 4-story building. I feel it would bring down the property values of my community and surrounding area. Having a 4-story building would definitely be an eyesore as I look out of my front kitchen window that faces north of the property. I am not against development, but I am against having a 4-story building, the only one in Islip that I know of. A concern especially on Grant Avenue, the gateway to Islip, as referred by Ms. Angie Carpenter, Islip Town Supervisor. We have a storage unit right across from where they want to build one, and another one right around the corner on Moffett Avenue. 4 stories would just be an eyesore down a residential street. Why 4 stories and ruin the beautification of Islip? Within the 26 years I've been here, I saw abandoned homes, and many from here on Union at Boulevard and south of Montauk, near the water. Islip has grown, but having a 4-story building on Grant Avenue, which is a residential road, gateway to the Islip, is horrible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ellen Freeman?
Hi, how's everyone tonight? My name is Ellen Freeman, and I live at 41 Grant Avenue. I watch the bald eagles and the osprey from my front porch. It is an absolute pleasure. I'm against the size of this building. I'm well aware that there is a fine balance between business and residences here in our community. I'm also really here to speak to the future of Islip. I'm a 3rd-generation Islip Village resident and 5th-generation Islip Town resident. What the town is losing by approving this building is that small town feel that most of us love here. I'm 50, so you can imagine how many years. My parents left because of this. It's about going to the street fair and knowing the people that are walking that street with you. It's about knowing your neighbors. It's about walking to the bakery in town for a pastry, seeing people you know along the way. It's about the teachers in the district knowing our children. Every commercial building and every apartment complex takes this away from our town. You're making it a transient place where people don't care about their Main Street. I love the life that this little town has given me, and I think you need, as a planning board, to think of what you're taking away from your residents today for this building and in other buildings in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Joseph Woods?
Good afternoon. My name is Joseph Woods. I live at 428 Chelsea Drive, Greenview Apartment number 2. I'm here concerning the storage. Most of the senior citizens where I stay, we sold our house and we moved to the Greenview apartment. And the storage is where we have our leftover that we couldn't get rid of when we had our home. And it's a very beautiful place. It's not congested. I go there most all the time, and it's very quiet. I understand that the people next door is complaining about how high it's going to be, but right behind there is the bus yard, and there's nobody there at the bus yard at all. I went by there today and saw the apartment, and where the building going to be, it will be far away from it. And if they're going to build the trees up like they're going to, you can't see it as you come across the road. So my whole thing is the senior citizen, if we are filling up that department now because we're getting more people in the senior citizen place. We're going to have nowhere to take our stuff, and we can't run all over the town to put our put our stuff somewhere. So I'm talking about the senior citizen. I'm not talking about the resident of the area, but we are the resident of maybe about 300 people stays in this complex. And that's what concerns us, that the more space we have would be better for us. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Christina Moon?
I'm short. Hi, I'm Christina Moon. I live at 19 Franklin Street in Islip. I came by today really quick because I knew this was going on. And I've lived here my whole life. I have to agree with everyone. I think we all agree 4 stories is a little ridiculous to have in our town. It's bigger than our firehouse. I mean, has there been conversations with our fire service here in town about responding and having accurate equipment for a building that's 4 stories? I want to know about... And the thing that really triggered me to come up here was the parking. I'm actually a customer of the storage facility across the street, and I will tell you it's very well maintained, everything is clean. But I've been there plenty of times where there is a box truck in the way and picking up people's things and out of their storage units, that 6 spots is definitely not working. And I think we all know that as far as asking for that not to be used. And I also know as a customer across the street, it's not even filled. So how do we even know we're going to fill 4 stories of storage units? And I think these are all things we need to take into consideration when you think about the logistics and the aesthetics of our town. And I don't know if this is just a negotiation to try to get something smaller. I agree that it's worth having it developed, but I would love to see it be more something the community can use versus storage units. There are plenty in the area. So just something to take into consideration when deciding what to do here. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are all the cards we have. Did anybody else come in who wished to be heard? Not seeing anyone, I'm going to turn to Mr. Gonzalez for a staff report.
I just would like to just briefly respond to some of those to
Can
those
we just
comments.
get the staff report? then I'll
Oh,
let you
I'm
come back
sorry.
for
I
comments.
didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is an industrial one-zoned, almost 1.5-acre property, currently undeveloped. Site has a long history in regards to use. From a site briefing report from the New York State DEC, the site operated as a facility that supplied wood, coal, cement, and lime from the late 1800s until around 1950. From about 1950 to the early 2000s, the site operated as an automobile junkyard. In 2003, the town of Islip cleared the property of debris and remaining junk, and in 2019, the remaining structure, which was a dwelling, according to the CO, was demolished. At some point, the Suffolk County Land Bank received the property due to unpaid taxes, and based on the prior use, it is considered a brownfield site. The applicant subsequently purchased the property in 2021 from the Suffolk County Land Bank. The applicant has worked with the New York State DEC and received approval for a site management plan, or an SMP. This SMP is a vetted document through the New York State DEC, which details the site history, potential contaminants present, the soil testing and remediation that will be required before, during, and post-construction, and the proper building methods based on cleanup requirements. A final sign-off from the New York State DEC will be required post-construction, and they will also need site plan approval and building permit issuance from the town of Islip, as well as Suffolk County Health Department approval for the project itself. The proposed project before the board tonight, as stated by the applicant, is for a 4-story, 57,200 square foot self-storage facility. The layout is quite simple. The building positioned in the middle of the property with the overhead door storage units around the perimeter and minimally necessary pavement and parking stalls with landscaping and buffers around the sides of the property. All minimum buffer requirements are being provided, and the plantings will be per town standards. The potential for building these buffer treatments on berms may be beneficial to provide additional planting height to help further screen the building from off-site view. The Zoning Board of Appeals, under application 301-23, granted a northerly side yard variance for 25 feet instead of the required 60, which is the side adjacent to the railroad. Every other minimum setback is met. Approximately 27% of the site is landscaped, with 50% of that requirement located in the front yard on Grant Avenue. The total green space on the site is over half the property, so about 52% is actual green space. In terms of the relaxations being requested, the overhead doors for the perimeter storage units on the east side of the building, which face Grant Avenue. The ingress-egress for the site is shifted further to the south. This allows for an expansive amount of landscaping in the front yard that will essentially screen those overhead doors from the street, so the visual impact on that particular part of it should be very minimal. To provide 6 parking stalls on site instead of the required 12. This building will have no office, which is not typical of self-storage facilities. Usually these buildings have small offices in the front. However, the applicant is the owner and operator of Lighthouse Storage across the street, which is 157A Grant Avenue, which was completed several years ago. The proposed building is essentially an extension of that building and will be sharing parking. 157A is overparked because the approval was done prior to the code change, which lessened the parking requirement for self-storage facilities. It used to be 1 parking stall for every 600 square feet. That was increased for 1 parking stall for every 5,000 square feet because that's more in line with the industry standard. So that site is actually overparked and they're going to be sharing parking. The proposal has an FAR of just under 90% instead of the maximum permitted 42. However, the applicant may be allowed that as of right without any variance if they comply with the 5 bonus criteria that are listed in the zoning code. So essentially that is a filing of a covenant on the property that would limit the use to a self-storage facility. They would need to provide 25% overall landscaping on site with a minimum of 50% in the front yard. The incorporation of renewable energy that provides for a minimum of 50% of the building's energy demand, and then the use of superior architecture on the street facing facade as well as all the other facades. Per the applicant, and they can speak to this, they will be meeting the 5 bonus criteria. So the FAR would be as of right and not need any variance from the Board of Appeals. And they are currently meeting the landscaping requirements for those. In regard to many of the public comments that have been received through email over the last week, the applicant can speak to it and provide more in-depth information, but for the record, the building, although proposed at 4 stories, is permitted as of right based on the Industrial 1 zone. The main bulk of the building is proposed around 43 or 44 feet in height. The only portion exceeding that is the ridge height on the east side of the building, which is a little bit higher for that lighthouse aesthetic, and its decorative cupola above that. So essentially, most of the building is only 8 or 9 feet taller than the maximum permitted height of the resident CA housing to the south, because their max cap is 35, and the majority of this building will be at around 43, 44. The setbacks, other than the northerly side to the railroad, which was granted by the Zoning Board of Appeals, all exceed the minimum based on the height of the building. So approximately you have an 80-foot front yard setback, an 88 rear yard setback, and 71-foot southerly side yard setback, where only 60 is required, so they all exceed that setback requirement. The traffic generated from self-storage compared to other uses is among the lowest, and this is supported by industry traffic standards. And lastly, the environmental concerns for the property are valid. However, all necessary measures have been and will be taken for this project to comply with the requirements as the applicant works with the DEC and the Health Department. Conditions were crafted. We heard the public comment. If the board would like to field questions and have the applicant provide some answers, staff would recommend that the board reserve decisions to make sure all the comments are heard, and then we can potentially bring it back with at a later hearing.
Thank you. Mr. Guardino, you wanted to answer some questions, then we'll have questions.
Just very quickly, just a minute. I think the board heard from heard the comments from the community, and I understand the emotion and the passion, but I just want to point out, and I think Mr. Gonzalez just mentioned it, what they're generally opposed to is they don't like the use, which is permitted in this district. They don't like the height, which we comply with. They don't like the FAR, but they think it's too big, which we will comply with the bonus criteria. I guess essentially what I'm saying is that we are complying with the code. I do understand, though, that if this is something different than they were used to, but I do point out there was a junkyard there for 50 years, and the one person who said about property values, I would think that this building being next door has to enhance the property values over it being a junkyard. So, and then lastly, with respect to environmental, there's concerns about, whether it's going to be clean or not. As Mr. Gonzalez just mentioned, client is working very closely with the DEC on a site remediation plan, and the site will be cleaned, to DEC standards. Thank you.
I'm going to turn to the board for questions. I'll come back with some for myself. I just want to clarify for the record that while all the uses you said are permitted, you wouldn't be before us if you didn't need some type of relaxation in order for us to grant this.
In terms of modification.
So there are some things that do come into question here that you would not meet it as is.
No, I was just saying the use, the use itself.
Well, you said the height, the use, and everything else. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you. Mr. Brown?
Oh, yes. A couple of questions. First of all, our veteran that got up and spoke, he mentioned the brownfield, which you just touched on. Is there a remediation plan, or is that process to take place with the DEC?
Yes. To answer that, the gentleman's question, and we thank you for your service. I really appreciate your time in the service. We worked with the DEC after we purchased the property, who gave us the guidelines in order to remediate the property. Again, being a junkyard, they found cadmium from batteries and a whole host of things. So in doing so, we met with and hired a special geologist. We did a number of tests on the property, test holes. They took tons and tons of samples. And based on all those samples, they came up with called a site management plan, which the DEC insists on these Brownsfields property, and it's quite in depth. And the long and short of it is, as any piece of the property gets touched, it has to get retested. And if it tests in such a manner that it's outside of the, the criteria for toxic waste or toxic material, then it has to be carted off-site and brought to a special facility. And again, I don't have to tell everybody, there's a cost involved with all that. And that's, that cost directly relates to it being 4 stories. It's just not financially feasible not having the extra square footage. The remediation that will take place, as the planning person, Tanner Gonzalez, had said, is going to be before, during, and even after. So it's an ongoing process that will be monitored by the DEC and I think the independent person that we hired to work with the DEC to make sure we're following their guidelines. Again, it's not something I'm familiar with in my years of construction, so we have the professionals who are going to guide us through this as we do it, and it'll be a clean site for all intents and purposes. The asphalt capping the property, the building capping the property, that's a plus. But anywhere else we dig, whether it's drainage or even to put in our flagpole, that soil has to get tested.
All right, thank you. Well, while you're up there, too, you own the facility across the street. So one of the women that spoke tonight was questioning, well, first of all, is it a 24-hour facility?
No? My partner, Charlie, manages that property with his lovely daughter, so they said, no, it is not.
Okay.
6 in the morning till 8 at night. So
Okay.
we'll probably be having those same hours. And the benefit, obviously, of that is our office is on that side of the property. And as Mr. Gonzalez said, we're overparked on that parcel. The box trucks, yes, when they come in to unload, they're obviously taking up more than one spot, even though we have an area for them. But beyond our gate, we have just tons of parking that nobody ever uses. It's used very, very infrequently. And I only think we get 5 to 8 people a day in that facility. I mean, it's Mr. Gonzalez, again, it's one of the lowest used, means of car traffic that's out there.
All right. You spoke to the screening that you're going to do along the residential property. Now, one of the questions the woman had was the lighting. Can you speak to the lighting?
Sure. I mean, the lighting will follow town code. It'll be dark sky lighting, so it will not shine back onto the residential property. We may have some down lighting, again, just to light up and illuminate the area in front of the building. And anything we have in the parking lot as per town code will face the building and not go onto the residential property. Again, they call that dark sky, and we do that quite often, and we never have a complaint.
Right. And the only other question I had was you moving the entrance and the egress down from the railroad tracks. Can you speak to that?
Sure. So, again, the idea was to obviously keep it as far away from the railroad tracks as possible because of that block does get used quite frequently by school buses and whatnot. So the distance between our new entrance and Chris Mack Court, there was relief there, or there's hopefully going to be relief there to enable just that extra space to give us, to the train tracks. It also allows a larger buffer because we were able to put the parking further to the south between the 4-story building and Chris Mack Court. So, good point. So we met with, one of the...
Can I just ask if you're going to speak to come up? She's keeping a record, so if you want to speak, you're welcome to. Just come up and state your name and for the record, and she'll take it down, however you want to do it.
I'll speak on that
Okay.
point, if you don't, Mr. Chairman. So, in meeting with the Town of Islip Fire Marshal, which was a very important aspect of this, and one of the residents had mentioned it as well, it's important that, God forbid, there is a fire, that the fire trucks have access and they meet, the fire apparatus, whether it's a hook and ladder truck or whatever. So that was another aspect of having, they spoke to having us move it down further south. So the building fully complies with the Town of Islip Fire Apparatus Code.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Cruz?
Hi. So one of the questions that I have, and I noticed that the ZBA gave you granted the northerly side yard variance. Would it, because I would think that it would be beneficial to put the south overhead doors on the north side. Is there a reason why that wasn't considered, or is that a consideration? Because then you don't have, if you kind of switch the building where all the overhead doors are towards the train station, train tracks, as opposed to the residential that you have, is there a reason maybe that wasn't considered, or is that something that can be considered? And also, the trash bin enclosures, if that can be placed somewhere else away from the residents as well.
Well, to answer your first question, it was designed that way by myself and my partner to take in consideration the residents at Chris Mack Court. We didn't want the building to be, we wanted the building to be far away as possible from the residential area. So therefore, that parking lot, which is about 40 feet, plus the buffer of about 25 feet, gives us about 60 or 70 feet to the fence line. If we had the garage doors on the north side, it would obviously, to meet fire apparatus, push that whole building south another 40 feet or more. And we tried to do that on the project across the street, which we only have 5 feet, I believe, to the property line, which is very limited. Here, it's kind of convoluted, but they have different zoning codes runs along the railroad track. So even though across the street we only needed 5 feet, here we needed more than that. So we went for the variance in order to push the building as far north as we could to keep as much of a buffer from our garage doors to the south, or the building, I should say, to Chris Mack Court. So that, coupled with the berm and the plantings, when anybody looks out their kitchen window, that someone alluded to, you're going to see mostly a fence line, and then beyond that would be, evergreen trees. And you may see the top, the mansard, which I mentioned earlier, which is a residential mansard.
Yeah, but I'm concerned because if you're coming in to use, go into those units and you're opening those up, and if they can be away from the residential area in some way as opposed to by the train, is why I was.
Yeah, the problem, again, it would push the whole building at least 40 feet that further. And keep in mind, with self-storage, most people are in and out. I mean, they very rarely, and, we do a pretty good job. I know Blaine does a great job. If someone's staying there a little bit too long, we make them park at a parking spot. So, last thing we want is anybody, blocking a thoroughfare, especially for the fire department.
Ms. Wilson? Oh, sorry, Ms. Cruz. The dumpster.
The dumpster.
The
I call it
dumpster.
trash bin.
So, as you develop these sites, as again Mr. Gonzalez spoke about, we're trying to max out as much landscaping as we can. So we have 50% of this site is pure landscaping, which is fantastic. So there was limited space where to put the dumpster, and we also have to take in consideration, we want that one dumpster truck to come in and come out, not drive around back in with the horn and all that. So that was the ideal spot for it, and quite frankly, it worked out very well. And that, again, the office is across the street, so that dumpster may get picked up once a week, if that.
Mr. Wilson?
Hi. So I'm not in the storage business, but you got a 57,000 square foot building, right? It's 4 stories. You're asking for a 50% relaxation down to 6 parking spots. So just walk me through, how many units are in this building? How many rental units are there?
Oh, my gosh. I would say there's probably close to 100.
So
Yeah,
potentially
depending on the
100
size,
clients.
the 100,
right?
the size.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Some of them are 5x5s, 5x10s, 10x10s.
And I guess just
Yeah.
walk me through how that works, how six
So
spots is
with-
enough.
With self-storage, as Mr., again, I refer back, it's the least impactful traffic-used application throughout the country.
So maybe by comparison, across the street, how many units do you have in there versus how many spots?
Well, one is 39,000, the other one's 57,000. So they're only about 13,000 square foot difference between the two. So we get 5 or 6 or 7 cars, maybe 8 at the most a day.
Right.
That are
But
in and
it's-
out.
But it's a smaller building, right?
Well, again, it's not that much smaller. You know, the one across the street is very deep and very wide, even though it's only 2 stories.
Okay.
You know, 17,000 square foot difference between the two. So about a 30% increase from the 4-story building, FAR-wise, to the building across the street. So you can anticipate probably 10 to 12 cars a day. Again, it's very, very low impact, which is, you know, yeah.
Good, Mr. Verjari.
Yeah, I just have one question for the applicant and then one from planning. Taking a look at the site plan, you said you met with the fire marshal on this?
Yes, we met with Rob Doucette a number of times, not once, probably
And they
4 or
saw
5
this
times.
exact, so the 25-foot travel lane for the emergency vehicles is okay under the code with a 4-story building?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he approved it. He changed it several times. My civil engineer, Tom Filizzola, and I met with him in his office a number of times. I mean, we met with him first to make sure we got it right. And we tried it, to Mrs. Cruz's question, we tried a number of different configurations on the site, always taking in mind that we wanted to push it as far to the north as possible, away from the residential area. But Mr. Doucette had the final say.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, the fire marshal is the final say
Yeah.
on that. I
Yes.
just wanted to make sure that they were okay with it. And then the question for planning is more for clarification. This is an industrial 1 zone site. So what other type of uses would be permitted here if the self-storage didn't go here? It's either for Sean or for Tanner, whoever wants to take it.
I can look it up, just give me 1 second.
As a follow-up to that question is, would a straight-out industrial warehouse that would be serviced by 53-foot tractor trailers, is that something that would be permitted on this site?
So, just to kind of go through them, the permitted uses in Industrial 1, which this property is, would be office, which includes medical office, manufacturing and warehouse uses, which consists of anything from printing plants, mini storage warehouses, supply houses or wholesale establishments, industrial businesses and warehouses. We have health clubs, lodges, churches. So, you know, those are the main uses. Indoor storage and sales of vehicles. Anything kind of outdoor related, though, would require special permits. But yes, if they wanted to go with a standard manufacturing or warehouse use, where there would be larger tractor trailers, that kind of operation, that would be permitted as of right.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Ruler?
Yeah. Good evening.
Evening.
You said it's a estimation, 100 units in the proposed building?
I would say at least 100 units, depending on, we haven't done the configuration as of yet. Again, they're all different sizes. It could be upwards of 200.
And how many would be on the 4th floor?
The 4th floor would mimic the 3rd floor, and the 2nd floor, for that matter. So,
Will they each have about the same amount of?
yeah, I mean, let's
or
say there was
25 in each
50,
floor?
50 on each floor, because the 1st floor has the garages that take up quite a bit. So it's, you know, there's, and again, we don't do this for a living. The one across the street was the first one we've ever done. It was a learning curve for us, but the company who manufactures the cubicles, you know, they look at the plan and they come up with the best use of the storages. The smaller ones are probably the least desirable. So the 10 by 10s, the little bigger ones, because nobody wants to squeeze into a little one. So it'd be similar probably next door.
How many are next door? Mr. Wilson asked the question, but you were
I'm
talking
not
about
exactly
square
sure, but I'll let my partner speak. He would know better than I.
Hi, good evening. My name is Charles Ferraro. I'm the president and owner of Bayberry Capital Group and partners with Mark in the Lighthouse Storage. There's approximate number of units on the facility next door is about 217 units. So to answer your question on how many units are going to be on the fourth floor, the larger units are on the first floor, and as you go up, so they're not identical, all the floors, so the smaller units are on the higher floors. So there are more units typically on the fourth floor.
And are the hours going to be the same?
The hours are the
6
same.
to 8?
Yes. Okay. Yes, they are. I also like to, make a couple comments on the lighting. I know somebody said something about the lighting. I do know that we do have the lighting that is 24 hours. I shouldn't say 24 hours, but it is on all evening. We certainly are, that's for security reasons. But if those lights are, bothering some of the neighbors, we can certainly, call us up and ask them to turn them off at it, more of a reasonable evening hour. So we can accommodate those lights over on the new space as well. I just wanted to also point out, I'm 65 years in Islip Town and a resident, and I am also a third generation in Islip Town. My family has been in Islip over 100 years. One of the benefits also we didn't point out to having this facility and the number of units that we need to accommodate is to be able to pay our tax bill. The storage facility across the street is 40,000 square feet. Last year we got assessed our tax bill was $180,000 for the first year. We probably anticipate this building to be $250,000. So if you take that revenue of about $450,000 per year times 10 years, that's $4.5 million to the Islip community. That's going to go directly back into the community. So when you say it's a storage facility that doesn't have any employees, but we do generate lots of revenue for the town and the hamlet of Islip, which directly goes right back into our community. So over 10 years, not a long time, it's $4.5 million. I think that's one a benefit that, we should not overlook.
Okay. One other question. You said 217 in the smaller facility, but 100 in the larger facility.
No, I didn't say he said that. Correct. It's probably about 300.
300 where?
In the new facility.
The new facility?
Yes.
Not 100?
No. So we have about 217 units in the existing facility, and we're not stabilized yet. We're about 60% stabilized. We're only open a year, and I mean, my daughter Blaine can attest, but the traffic into the existing facility, there's not many cars. I mean, if there's more than 3 cars at one time ever throughout the day, that's a lot. I mean, we do have a U-Haul. We do have U-Haul that we rent out, and we keep those trucks on the east side on the 157 facility. We're not going to be having that over there, so that takes up some of the spots. And you might think that some of the trucks and cars are full, but it's just U-Haul taking up spots for the public to rent.
Okay. One other question. I think in the presentation you said, except for the cupola, it would be 50-something feet. But Mr. Gonzalez said something about 40.
No, it's 40.
It's 40?
So the majority of the roof line is 44 feet.
Okay.
We have a cupola
That goes up 20 feet?
and a gambrel roof line that exceeds just on the eastern portion of the building.
Yes, I see that.
Yeah, and there's about a 19-foot difference from the top
Okay.
of the cupola to the ridge line, you know, to the majority of the ridge
It's
line
tough
of
to
the height
see
of the building.
19 feet from the picture. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, that's all.
Mr. Guardino, I just want to go through some questions, just generally speaking for the record.
Sure.
And maybe I'll, the first one to Mr. Gonzalez. I know we're talking about the park and relaxation, we're over parked, but Mr. Gonzalez, you stated earlier on the record that the building across the street went up under the old standards, and there's already been a correction to account for parking. If this were to be built under the old standard, how many spots would be required?
So, just for the record, the old requirement was 1 parking stall for every 600 square feet. The new requirement is 1 stall for every 5,000 square feet. So if it was under the old requirement, they would need to provide 96 parking stalls on this project. Now they only need 12.
Right, so there's already been a reduction in the number. There's already been accounting for the fact that clearly what happened across the street was overparked, but there's already been an adjustment to bring it down to 12, which is how we got down to 12. So I know the comparison to across the street, I agree 100% across the street is overparked, but there's already been something done to account for the fact that you don't need that many spots. We're still asking for a 50% reduction from the 12 spots down to 6.
No, and I understand that, but I think the unique situation here is that my clients own the, the site across the street, and there's the requirement for cross-access and cross-parking, which is going to allow, that if they were separately owned, I would absolutely agree with you and say, well, yeah, you're right, the adjustment was made. And here the adjustment's made, but the way to mitigate that impact is the fact that we have this huge parking lot right across the street that my clients own, and the town is going to require that there be an agreement, making sure that we have it.
I understand that, I fully
Yeah.
support that. I'm just saying that if you go into a self-storage facility, you're going to park along the
Oh, I-
landscaping on the south side, because you're not going to walk boxes across the street to bring them in and out of a self-storage warehouse.
I
So
don't
reality
disagree with
versus
you. I don't
what you
disagree
have
with you. Yes.
is something completely different. So I
Yes,
just
I agree.
pointed out for the record, it's
Yes,
great
thank
that you
you.
have it, but it's not adjoining, it's across the street. And people are not going to carry boxes, especially if they're seniors, as we heard a lot about, who need storage, walking in and across the street with boxes both ways. Sort of, it's great, but you're only going to have 1 employee, I think you said, or 1 car for an employee, so you're going to have only 1 person parking across the street, so it only frees up 1 spot, technically. So that, just an issue I want to raise.
Not, actually, no employees on this side, because
so-
there's no office.
So nobody will be
there's
parking,
no
okay.
employees there.
So nobody will be parking there for employees. But either way, if somebody's going to go there and there's no spots, the likelihood of them parking across the street and carrying boxes across the street and vice versa is not likely. It could happen, but it's not likely they're going to find a spot
But when
along.
they come to lease the facility, they're going to go across the street. They're not going to come to this side, right? They can only go to that side when they come to rent the facility, right?
No,
Because
I'm
there's
talking
no
about if
office on
they're-
this side.
If they're taking stuff in and out in the 6 parking.
No, I agree that. I'm
Okay.
just saying, but there's another component to it
Oh,
as
yeah, I'm
well.
not-
I agree.
I'm not. So
Yes.
that was just one thing I just wanted to put on the record.
Yes.
The other thing I just want to sort of raise is the landscaping. We're at 50% because places where we probably should have parking, we're allowing landscaping to go. And we're putting the 50% landscaping for a reason, right? I know we strive to do that, but we're doing that in order to meet the FAR, to get the increased FAR, is why we're getting to 50%. So I just want to just state that. I just wanted the record to be
Okay,
clear
yes,
that, you know,
yeah.
it's not out of the kindness
Yes,
of our hearts,
yes.
it's we're doing
Yeah,
this
I
because
know.
there's a benefit that we're receiving, or that the applicant's receiving in return for doing that.
Right.
So my concern is the following. It's really, I mean, there's already been an application approved on the west side for more townhomes to go up there. That'll be adjoining the property. There's an application that's already been approved, I think, along Union Boulevard for the southwest side where more townhomes are going up. So there's going to be more residential in that immediate area. The height of the building is what gets to me. I mean, anything that goes there will improve what's there now. This is self-storage, are low use, I'll give you that. Not as many people come in and out of it, there's not as much traffic, it's not as noisy, it has a lot of other uses that could be in there, which is a good use for it. But sometimes the lot itself is too small to put in there what you want to put in there without getting a lot of exceptions granted. And my concern here is just the height of it. And again, we can say there are plenty of other uses that can go in there, but they're going to run into the same problems. You can put a warehouse in there, but if tractor trailers can't make U-turns in the parking lot, you don't meet the parking requirements, they're going to have to come before us to get a bunch of relaxations in order to make it work. So while I support a self-storage going in there, I think it's probably the best use in industrial use. The height is where I have a concern up against residential areas and trying to put it If you met the 50%, if you met everything else, if you met the parking and you weren't before us, you could do it as of right today without being here. The fact is, you need to come before us to get that in order to make it the size you want to make it.
Yeah, but I would just ask, I mean, do you consider this that we need a lot of relief? I'm thinking this is an application that needs very modest relief.
Well, parking
I
alone
mean,
is...
you know the applications I've made in the past.
The parking relaxation is certainly significant, percentage-wise.
Okay.
And the only way you get to the landscaping is getting that relaxation. So my concern, again, is the height. The use I like, the cleanup I like. I have not figured out in my mind which way I'd go on this at the end of the day, but I just want to put those things on the record.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, and Mark wants to speak, but the town board has decided, and I understand your concern, but the town board has decided that in the I-1 district, and this is zoned I-1, that buildings can be this tall. So again, I'm not, I know there are other things.
I'm not arguing that at all
Yeah.
with you. I agree that
Yeah.
you can do a 4-story if you have all the other requirements
you
met.
have all
You're
the
coming before us for relaxation, which, gets us to the point. And I don't know,
Yeah.
when you're before the ZBA, did you ask for the relaxation on the north side with the point being made that you're going to put a 4-story building up, or just that you wanted?
I was not representing them at the time, so I'll
Oh,
let Mark.
that would be a question. I already asked the ZBA to answer that question for me.
Yes, it was always a 4-story building.
So that was presented to the ZBA that way.
Yes, it was. And Mr. Chairman, I would only say that, again, my partner and I, would not take this on, this risk, knowing that it was a Brownsfield property, unless we, got everybody on board and agreed that in order to do this and clean up this toxic site, that it was a give and take. And everybody, from the DEC, Walter Panic, the Suffolk County Health Department, Janet Gremley, Tom Silmy from the Suffolk County Legislature. I mean, we worked with these people for years, along with the town officials, to make this a viable project, a viable site, put back on the tax rolls for the town of Islip. I mean, cleaning up a toxic site in itself is huge. It's huge. I mean, and I think the town even went as far as one point to put a code on the books years ago that they would possibly waive, I'm not sure if it's on the books, but waive any type of permit fees if these Brownsfield properties, to encourage developers like us to go in, because there's no more vacant land, and clean these spots up. And to your answer, under special use, to Mr. Gonzalez, yeah, if we got special use, the only thing we could do is pave the whole entire property with buffers and lease it out to tractor trailers or a bus company, and they could run their diesel engines all day, or a landscaping company. So it's a little more egregious if we try to go with a different road. We all agreed, and when I say we, the people I just mentioned from the different agencies, ourselves, even the town officials, that self-storage would be the least impactful. Unfortunately, for us, it only makes sense if we go the 4 stories. I'm not sure about the town-owned project you mentioned, but if I'm thinking it's the old post office property, that's probably going to enter on egress in and off of Union Boulevard. I don't think it can go back that far, because I know there's a stream behind that. I could be wrong. Mr. Colgan may know better than I, but I don't think it affects that at all. And keep in mind, we back up, to a major train thoroughfare, and the train doesn't stop at that train track. It goes through at a very high speed. So, again, we're going to mitigate and do everything we can to make our neighbors happy regarding landscaping. That would be the best avenue of approach. And for resale value, obviously, when you try to sell something next to, a toxic waste area, that's a problem. And, from the plume that arose from the coal fusion or the gas fusion plant in Bayshore, that became a major issue, as everybody knows, for those in that area for resale. In fact, one of the houses Nat Grid bought to put monitors in, they just resold it after 10 years of having monitors in. So, that's the toxic waste issue is certainly something that, I hope we're applauded for once we're done, because usually when we finish these projects, our neighbors tend to say thank you. And we, again, living in this area, growing up in this area, we want to do the right thing. But I thank you for your time. If there's any more questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. And I'll just say, Ms. Aguilar, certainly my mind is not made up on this yet because of the things you said. I mean, the brownstone, there's a significant investment there. Additionally, we work with a lot of developers in the town. You are high on the list in terms of your word means something when you're before this board, unlike some others that come before the board and we have issues with and go back. So that means something. So, but the height gets to me in terms of, have you had a meeting with the neighbors to the south?
We have not, and I apologize for that.
That may be something we're likely going to reserve this evening. That may be something you want to do and have that discussion with them.
Sure.
And see what can be worked out. The other thing I just want to, again, I'd like to have the record clear all the time in case things end up in court. You mentioned the fact of trucks, you can pave it and put trucks in there. I mean, outside parking of trucks and the rest would still require a special permit.
Special permit.
So it would not be as of right. Again, I just want to,
It would not.
I just want to put that on the
I
record to be
agree,
clear.
I agree. But there is a chance, right, that we could put,
My point is you should focus on what you focused on originally, not what can be without a special permit, not the fact that the number of spots, the relaxation, the new versus the old, the fact of who you are, what you've done in this community, what can be done in terms of the cleanup, what's the money that's going in, stuff like that, certainly to me mean a lot more than going through things that I can give you a counterpoint every time. I mean,
Right.
that's why you pay Mr. Guardino to make those arguments, but, you know, your name and reputation obviously means something in this town. So
Thank you.
I would suggest a meeting with the neighbors to the south to have that.
we will do that. And I think everybody would agree. I mean, the objective here really is, you know, if the site gets cleaned up, that's one less Brownsfield property. You know, that's sitting stagnant, and who knows what's emitting from it. But we will reach out to the neighbors to our south, and hopefully we can convince them it's a good project.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from the board? Anything further from the applicant? Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Brown?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to close the public hearing and reserve decision tonight.
It's a motion by Mr. Brown to close the public hearing and reserve decision. Is there a second? Ms. Cruz, all in favor? Opposed, abstentions? We are reserved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 2 on the agenda has been adjourned. Item 3, site plan modification decision item, Allied Scrap LLC, SP 2021-012, west side of Lincoln Avenue, 538 feet south of McCormick Drive, Holbrook, 1120 Lincoln Avenue. Applicant requests permission to locate an overhead door facing a right-of-way in connection with the construction of a new recycling facility building. Is the applicant here? Come on, come up. If you don't want to say anything, I can go right to a staff report. It's up to you. Mr. Gonzalez, I'm going to go right to you for a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is an industrial 2-zoned 4.7-acre site, currently a scrap metal processing facility, junkyard, and auto wrecking operation. The main existing building was originally CO'd as an office storage building in 1964, with an addition the same year and also in 1968. A change of use was CO'd in 1984 from outdoor storage of vehicles to indoor storage and sale. In 2012, the town board granted a change of zone from the prior Industrial 1 to the current Industrial 2 and a town board special permit for the scrap metal processing facility under CZ 2012-048. A site plan was approved in 2013 for this use. Then in 2017, the town board granted a special permit for a junkyard auto wrecking component as well as a modification of CNRs. Around 2018, the almost 5,900 square foot approximately 20-foot tall electronic recycling storage building was constructed. No permit or site plan approval was obtained for this. However, ZBA approval was granted in 2020 for a deficient side yard setback for that building in conjunction with a separate building side yard relief. This building will be legalized through the current site plan application as well as the proper building permit. The only request before the board tonight is for the existing overhead door on that recycling storage building, which faces Lincoln Avenue. The building itself is set back 176 feet from the street property line and about 115 feet back from the existing 6-foot-tall chain link with stockade fence that fronts that parking area. The overhead door is directly in line with that northerly curb cut. The vicinity of Lincoln Avenue is mostly industrial. However, there is the Lincoln Avenue Mobile Home Park across the street to the northeast. There are existing mature buffer plantings that run along the northerly side of the access point for that curb cut, shielding most of the building. However, staff is requesting additional screen plantings in front of the existing 6-foot fence on each side of the swing gate. In addition, it will be conditioned that that swing gate remain closed when not in use, and the building itself also acts as a visual and noise buffer to the main site operation that occurs in the rear of the property. So based on the above, staff recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions, which provides those additional measures to mitigate the request.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. I would note for the record, you might have been over the 3 minutes allotted, but you have as much time as you need. Are there any questions for either the applicant or for?
I have one, and just.
Just come on up and just state your name for the record, please.
The covenants and restriction, have you read them? Oh, could you give your name for the record?
Sorry,
please?
Sean Boyle, R&M Engineering.
Right, and you've reviewed the covenants restriction and agreed to them?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Any further questions? Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Brown?
I'd like to make a motion to grant the application.
It's a motion by Mr. Brown to grant the application, subject to the covenants and restrictions. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Moriarty. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? The application is granted. I should note for the first application that Mr. Moriarty was recused, and he is now back at the table.
After the discussion.
Yeah. Item 4 on the agenda, planning board application decision item, Carlos Cintron, Twins Veterinary Hospital, PB 2025-002, west side of 4th Avenue, approximately 413.90 feet south of Union Boulevard, Bayshore, 124th Avenue. Applicant requests relief from 68-270C5 to allow less transparent glass along the first level facade on the primary street frontage in the business district. Is the applicant here? Not seeing the applicant, I will turn to Ms. Wozniak for a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The property is located on the west side of 4th Avenue, south of Union Boulevard in Bayshore, across from the Tritech mixed-use development. The property is improved with the one-story office building originally constructed in the 1970s. Tonight, the applicant is looking to obtain architectural relaxations in connection with the conversion of the building into a vet's office. The site is currently in site plan review with engineering for exterior site improvements, which includes a facade renovation. The applicant is completely renovating the front facade, which includes the installation of a gabled front entrance canopy, brick veneer wainscoting, lap siding, gooseneck lighting, and some new windows. The applicant has also agreed to paint the support pillars a white color to better fit in with the surrounding environment. Since this property is zoned business district, it is required that the front facade, between 3 feet and 8 feet above grade, be comprised of at least 70% transparent glass. The reason behind this requirement is to support street-level engagement, allowing pedestrians to see inside shops, offices, and restaurants, and to encourage retail visibility for economic growth and promote social interaction and community connectivity. This architectural requirement was aimed at the traditional downtown Main Street buildings, where parking is located in the rear, there is a high level of pedestrian activity, and buildings are close to the street. This property is located quite a distance from Main Street. It is a pre-existing building that is set back over 45 feet from 4th Avenue with parking in front of the building. Visibility into the office would be extremely limited due to that setback and the parking area. In addition, the elevations do have a substantial amount of glazing along the front elevation, which contributes nicely to the overall look of the building. The addition of more windows is not recommended, as the floor plan layout has exam rooms for the animals along the front, and additional windows may provide a distracting environment for the animals. Based on the unique location of the property, building, and the floor plan of the space, planning recommends the board grant the application.
Thank you, Ms. Wozniak. Any questions for Ms. Wozniak? Not seeing any. Is there a motion?
A motion to grant the application.
It's a motion by Mr. Rulon to grant the application, second by Mr. Wilson. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the application is granted. Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved. Mr. Moriarty, all in favor, opposed, abstentions, we are adjourned. Thank you.